Before he took up with Paulina, he'd had a few desultory affairs. Without these, the boredom would have been unendurable. Other co-workers dealt with the same problem differently. For lunch, 3 men would each throw in a ruble for the price of a bottle, but Alec didn't have the right constitution for this. He resorted to persuading some Mila, Luba, or Luda to accompany him into a small utility room that smelled heavily of fennel. When he met Paulina, however, an alternative to the fennel-smelling room had miraculously presented itself. After living under the strict regime of his in-laws for 6 years, Carl, Alec's brother, had succeeded in obtaining a separate apartment in a cooperative that was being built in Teka, within walking distance of VEF, the factory where they all work. For 2 years, as it was slowly being constructed, he had passed the building every day on his way to work. When it was finally completed, people received letters telling them that they could take possession. Vans and movers arrived. Curtains and lamps appeared in the windows of his future neighbors. Carl was impatient to join them, but Rosa refused to move until the apartment had been prepared to her taste. She and her mother hired an interior decorator and spent weeks deliberating over the wallpaper, carpets, furniture, and appliances. The decorator had come recommended in the typical way, as a resourceful person capable of getting her hands on merchandise of incomparable scarcity. However, months elapsed between the deliberations and the arrival of the wallpaper, carpets, and furnishings. Rosa, her mother, and the interior decorator made intermittent visits to the apartment, which otherwise remained unoccupied. The glaring fact of this incensed Carl every time he passed the building to and from work. In retaliation, he began to use the apartment on his own. He invited friends to drink and play cards. He let Alec use it for his liaisons. On occasion, he brought women there himself. For Alec, it was in this apartment that much of his courtship with Paulina transpired. Sometimes they would sneak away during the lunch break. Other times, Paulina would invent an excuse delaying her after work. The apartment, which lacked a stove, chairs, carpets, and wallpaper, had almost everything else. There were 2 little beds in the children's room, and there was a larger bed, albeit without linen, in what was to be Carl and Rosa's bedroom. A velour couch and coffee table occupied the main room. Carl made some token effort to tidy the place up, but there was usually an array of dirty ashtrays and empty wine bottles on the kitchen counter. To Rosa's and his mother-in-law's objections, Carl responded that he would resume living a normal family life when they moved into the apartment. Rosa refused to make what she considered a premature move. For months there was, between her and Carl, a rancorous impasse. It was finally breached when, one afternoon, Rosa, her mother, and the interior decorator arrived unexpectedly at the apartment. When Rosa opened the door, she was confronted by a distressing tableau. The tableau featured Carl in the foreground, on the sofa, with a uniformed policewoman in his lap. In the background, Alec, with his shirt unbuttoned, stood framed in the doorway to the boys' bedroom. Alec recalled the terrifically stunned expression on Rosa's mother's face. A look of total incomprehension, as if she were witnessing something altogether alien, which her mind simply couldn't process. "Oh my God," Alec heard her say. "He's gotten himself involved with the police." Alec also recalled the scandalized expression on the face of the interior decorator, a tall, middle-aged woman, prim and self-possessed, wearing a beige polyester pantsuit, the height of fashion. She looked at Carl and then Alec as if at moral garbage, coarse, low people. Rosa, meanwhile, turned white. Carl regarded her with the sublime equanimity of a Chinese. "You have only yourself to blame," he said. The policewoman extricated herself from Carl's lap and smoothed her uniform. Also, Paulina emerged quietly from the boys' bedroom and thus earned herself Rosa's unwavering enmity. "Taking up with common sluts," Rosa said, the tears starting to flow. "I'd expect this of your sex-maniac brother, but never of you." Now, Carl replied. "No need for insults. Besides, Tatiana has recently been promoted to the rank of investigator, and Paulina is a graduate of the Polytechnic and a valued employee of the VEF Mechanical Engineering Department. Hardly common." Alec couldn't remember where or how Carl had met Tatiana, and that day in the apartment represented the first and last time he ever saw her. Still, because of her uniform and the capricious, vindictive authority it represented, her role in the episode acquired a special prominence. Mostly, Alec felt, this was because of the way Rosa had behaved. An ordinary person would have been intimidated by the uniform, but, to Rosa's credit, she had been entirely unmoved, and despite the insults she directed at him, Alec admired her subversive integrity. "I'll never forgive you for this," Rosa whispered. "I wanted to make a beautiful, beautiful home for us, and instead of thanking me, you've humiliated me in front of my mother, our children, and Alla Petrovna." "Look, don't overdo it," Carl said. "I told you 1,000 times. I've had it living with your parents. We finally got an apartment, and all I asked was that we move in. And what do I get instead? Alla Petrovna. By the way, Alla Petrovna, since you're here, perhaps you could update me on the progress. Any word on our chairs, our carpets, our stove?" Flustered, Alla Petrovna was slow to respond. Rosa's mother spoke for her and alluded to the item Alla Petrovna was holding in her hands. Everyone turned to look and saw that, yes, in her hands was a thin sample roll of wallpaper. Alec noted a constellation of brown spheres on a pale yellow background. Considering it, Carl screwed up his face in disgust. "You're telling me we waited 3 months for this revolting pattern? Looks like shit floating in piss." "What a despicable bastard you are," Rosa sobbed. Nobody spoke for some time. Carl shook his head ruefully and emptied the contents of a bottle of plum brandy. Everyone seemed to contemplate the next step. It was then that Alec decided to walk Paulina out of the apartment. He started to button his shirt. As he did so, the policewoman broke the silence. Speaking in the declarative, forthright manner of her profession, she said, "Carl, you are mistaken. It is a very attractive pattern." Three days later, Carl, Rosa, and the boys moved into the apartment. The fecal motif wallpaper went up. A stove was procured. Someone donated a carpet, someone else chairs. Carl stopped drinking, playing cards, and chasing after women. Finally, the master of his own house, he devoted himself to home improvement, a preoccupation more arduous and demanding than fist-fighting or bodybuilding. Just a wangle ceramic tile for the bathroom, a man pitted himself against the mighty arsenal of the Soviet state. In effect, it was as if Leonid Ilyich was himself personally opposed to the tiling of a bathroom. It was the supreme challenge, eclipsing every other human endeavor: sport, sex, philosophy, art, and science. Carl, a pragmatist by nature, had always been inclined this way. And had he remained in Riga, his future would likely have been as a shady, jittery operator in the mold of Alter Schlam. Alter Schlam is a character who's a famous black marketeer in the book. But instead, Carl caught the break Schlam never had. For the bargain price of 500 rubles, the state allowed him to forfeit his citizenship and book passage to the fabled capitalist West, where speculation was neither a dirty word nor an indictable offense, where, had he not been confounded by history, a man of Schlam's considerable talents would have owned city blocks and factories, not to mention a limousine, a mansion, and a yacht.